What's up, guys? So, if you're new here and don't know why I'm SB'd as public enemy media number one, it's because a few years back I got to investigating our history and why basically all of the UNESCO World Heritage sites from all around the world of the previous culture look like they've been taken out by absolute tsunamis, earthquakes, and you name it. But you find places like the ancient city of Neapolis that is half on land and half out in the Mediterranean Sea now, and things like the port of Ephesus, to where the port is 3 miles from where the ocean is now. And what I learned is all of that crap that they teach us in school pales in comparison to the actual important things, like the fact that we have cyclical catastrophes come through and wipe out civilizations every few hundred years. Now, these vary in intensity. There's like the 1300s and the Wolf Minimum that they give us the story of the Black Death, but they leave out the big long series of catastrophes that happened at that time that seems pretty important to me. That was a really bad one in the 1300s. And then you have a milder case like the Dalton Minimum back in the 1800s. During this period, we saw the New Madrid earthquakes that lasted for a year long. There was a series of volcanic eruptions. Mount Tambora went off in 1815, caused the year without summer in 1816, which of course led to famine. Not as bad as the 1300s, but it was bad enough that pretty much all the livestock got ate and they had to invent the bicycle. True story. And some of the scientists out there are saying that we're most likely starting into a grand solar minimum right now. If you guys have not witnessed the weather shifts yet, I don't know where you've been. This has been the windiest year I can remember. I mean, it's ridiculous. And this is a cycle that is just beginning that could last 80 to 100 years, even longer. We actually went into a pretty deep minimum during the Maunder minimum. And guys, this is just a few hundred years ago, 15 to 1600s. It's referred to as the Little Ice Age. You also have a lot of weird atmospheric phenomena associated with this. And guys, this is a real picture right here. This was featured by suspicious observers, which I'll get to in a minute. But the evidence for these shifts can be found everywhere in ancient art, and all of the old petroglyphs are basically showing stuff that they saw up in the sky. It's pretty apparent here in Anza Borrego, some video I took of the cave art out there. I mean, it's suns and stars, and I don't know about the weird wonky people. But anyway, these are all associated with the grand solar minimums. And, you know, the 1300s was a bad one to where they say that 15 out of 16 perished in some places. But I think it was about a third of all the people, like biblical. But then in the longer cycles, you have magnetic pole reversals. And they've proven this by looking at which way magnetic particles in the volcano dried, and have found out that within a matter of weeks, magnetic north was in a different location as this lava dried. But there's two channels that I want to share their research with you guys. And these are both legitimate scientists. These aren't just hacks on YouTube like me. They're actual scientists. And you'll probably be a little more than surprised like I was when you hear what they've got to say. Now, Bennett, Suspicious Observers, his estimation of what's going on right now is by as soon as 2030 to 2040, the magnetic pole, according to him, will be off in the ocean next to India. And all of these shifts tie in with what we're experiencing in the world right now because the powers that be know about these cycles. We'll talk about that a little more at the end. And I thought I'd throw this in for all the people that say the earth is flat, there can't be a pole shift. Well, guess what? This is a flat magnet with a magnetosphere, just like the Earth's magnetosphere, right? Anyway, now let's look at Maverick Star Reloaded, another legitimate scientist that has set up monitoring stations independently all around the world. He's always asking for donations. I do need to send him $20 or something because he deserves it. He's working. And they actually own all of their own equipment. They're not relying on any organization out there that is pretty much untrustworthy. And there's not a lot of confidence going around in these alphabet agencies these days. Anyway, according to his measurements and research, I believe he said that the current speed of the migration is 150 miles a month, which would be 5 miles a day, that the North Pole is migrating to the south. And a couple weeks ago, he gave the actual location at that time, and I pulled it up, and that's where the actual North Pole sits right now as we speak. You see how far off of true north center that is? Now, according to him, we've got 10 months until the North Pole migrates down to the 40-degree mark. It's not 40 degrees latitude. I'll get to that in a minute. But you can see the red dot there is his 40-degree mark, and it's not got that much further to go. Now, he says that he's going to do another experiment tomorrow to show everybody what happens when it gets to the 40-degree mark. But when you are within those boundaries on the top in between the two 40s where it says 100, when you're within that, you are in the strong magnetic field lines. Once you break that 40-degree mark, then you're in the weak magnetic field lines. Once that happens, then the pole migration will speed up exponentially. Who knows how fast it will go after that. He also says that this is weakening the Earth's magnetosphere, so this is letting in a lot more cosmic rays and even a lot more UV rays. There's Mr. MBB or whatever out in Arizona. He takes his own UV readings, and the last couple weeks out there, he's getting UV readings now that are above normal peak season UVs. So two totally different time frames we're talking about, but both seem to be in agreement that the North Pole is migrating, and it's looking like either an excursion, which it goes down to that point by India and then returns to the North Pole, or a flip. Now, I have no idea if this is actually going to happen. This is supposed to happen on like a 12,000 year cycle. But what I do know for a fact is the Earth has always gone through these cyclical changes. And if I can find out about this, then the powers that be definitely know about these things. They wage wars at these times. They do conquests. The Vikings even invaded England during one of these times, and it's gone back even further than that. Back in Roman times, they called them by a different name back then, like the Danes or whatever, but they went as far as Rome on raiding and pillaging. But one thing is for sure, we are definitely starting into one of these earth change periods, and if you haven't just noticed it in the world around you yet, then I take the blinders off. I think you're just deluding yourself that everything's okay, when I hope everything will be okay, but life that we have known is not going to continue like it was. We just happen to all live through a really nice 200-year period, just like the medieval warm period just before everything popped off in the 1300s. Now that we're on the same page, we all understand that these cyclical events happen. Look at what is going on in the world. I can show you example after example of monkey wrenches being thrown into the food supply and distribution networks. Not only do we have these cyclical changes that automatically happen every couple hundred years, but they are intentionally screwing up the food supply, and you can't help but think that they don't want many of us around, Georgia Guidestones and all that. We've been seeing record bad crops for the last few years, and even if everything went perfectly fine from now for the next 5 years, it would take years for the food reserves and the supply chain to get back to what we had as normal. And I love that Zero Hedge author signs as Tyler Durden, because when I read all of these CNN and all these other articles, they are such made up pen names. So at least Zero Hedge is honest about their pen names. But instead of warning everybody that we could be in for hard times ahead, no, they're turning around saying it's your fault for using the products that we sold to you. And if you don't stop, the whole world's going to boil over. And with them cutting train shipments, like I said, the pilot stations, the big truck stops all across America are supposed to cut their diesel shipments by 50% this week. Also, the biggest fertilizer plant in America, they told them they had to cut fertilizer shipments by 20% during the planting season. All of these little things are adding up. Also, our strategic reserves of oil have been intentionally depleted by 20%, making us 20% weaker. And all of these things add up to make us weaker and weaker. And here's a thought. What if Maverick Star Reloaded is actually right and we only have 10 months left? Wouldn't that make a lot of sense for why they are such in a rush with crisis after panic, keeping everybody distracted from everything and making sure that they stay in power? Or even if it does take into the 2030s, 2040s, you can see that they've already got their plays in motion and what they want. They want total control over everything, especially the food supply. Now, these cyclical events are remembered by indigenous peoples all around the world, and one of the best records that I have is of the Incas. They say this about it. In those days, there was a great famine which lasted for 7 years, and during that time, the seed produced no fruit. Many died of hunger, and it is even said that some ate their own children. I just recently was talking about that in Roman times all the way up to the 1300s catastrophes. There's a lot of, when people get hungry, they get desperate. In that time, there existed a great loss of life among the Indians from hunger, thirst, and pestilence, because as punishment, God withheld the rain for 7 years, some say 10 years, and there were cataclysms, earthquakes, and many storms, it being now the occupation of all to weep and bury the dead. Now, let me just tell you, in all of the ancient accounts, it always starts with extreme droughts and extreme flooding. Sometimes it's one before the other, but it always happens. And just so you know, the western states of the United States are in what they are saying is the worst drought in 1,200 years. And if your records go back far enough, then you get into the more extreme events like this one. One time the sun fell out of the sky, and this so touched the heart of a Maccoby, he managed to pick it back up and tie it in place so that it wouldn't fall back down. The same thing happened to the sky, so the sky fell, but the ingenious and robust Maccoby hoisted it back up on the ends of poles and reattached it to its axis. This traditional history of the Incas is literally carved into stone in the Intihuatana, which literally means a place to tie up the sun. So this could be a mild case that we go through. It could be a sun falling out of the sky. I don't know. But you may want to learn gardening or something. But you should probably like, subscribe, and share this with other people and start forming up your tribes. Public Enemy Media Static out.